Hi friends, welcome to Pro Coding Skills, and today we'll see about one of the important topic in Salesforce called Apex triggers. See, many of you already know to work with Salesforce Apex triggers, but this is a video where I was going to detail little bit who is wanted to learn something new or they wanted to improve on their best practices and more than that we'll see deep dive into the basic concepts of trigger, right? So if you ask me, hey, why we need triggers in Salesforce? See, triggers are basically a automated business function. So where you can leverage, let's say you have workflow rules, you have process builder, but they have their own limitations to handle a complex scenarios. But the triggers are something which can more capable to improve your business automations like callouts and you can do a cross queries, you can run SOQLs, you do cross object update. There are different functionality where the boundaries are big now. The boundaries you can do lot of functions which is not possible with the standard configurations of any Salesforce automation rules that we have today. But in triggers, but because we are trying to write some triggers on an existing objects, it's really important to follow some of the best practices. To follow the best practices, first we need to understand the trigger architecture, how the trigger performs, when it will come in play, and what are the events that will come in play. So all this something we need to understand. Let's say triggers are basically generally, right, it's as soon as any DML operations happens on any S objects, it could be standard object or it could be a custom object. Any changes happens to the records, insert, update or delete or even undelete. Any changes happens. So the triggers will come in place and they will start executing as per the defined event. See, when I say defined events, generally you can assume we can user can able to create a record, he can able to update a record, he can delete the record, and he can also undelete the record from the recycle bin. So all these actions are possible events. The events are again classified, it's been again classified into different kinds like before insert, after insert, before update, after update, before delete, after delete, and after undelete. We have totally seven different types of triggers are placed today available in Salesforce where you can execute your custom logic or business functions as per the trigger events. Okay, and the best rule always, right, one object per trigger with the defined events again, right, one event per one object. That's like good considerations that we can make. So in trigger, we have how many events? We have totally seven events. And by default, triggers are bulkified. By default, triggers are bulkified. It is capable to handle a large number of data. Multiple records can be processed at a time. So triggers are bulkified. There's nothing to worry about bulkification here. So what need to be worried here? How you are going to handle those trigger context data. When I say trigger context data, what is this trigger context data? See, when I say it always important, it's a very important that we need to understand what is trigger context data. So in trigger, basically trigger is a derived from a system class. So how it looks like system dot trigger. So this is your class. In this class, you have a class level variables and nothing but your trigger level variables, nothing but context variables of a triggers. What is there? We have event based context variables like all we have insert, update, delete, right? So all these returns in a boolean like is insert if trigger is inserting, or trigger is updating, or trigger is deleting, or trigger is undelete. So all these are context variables. When you ask me, when the point comes here, okay, we know we have a context variables for events. What about the data? What about the records that I'm processing as a user? So for that also we have a context variables called a list type and a map type. The list type goes like a two, like a trigger dot new, which is a new set of values of your S object records, and whereas trigger dot old, which holds a old set of information. let's say if the record is being updated, it have two versions of data, before update and after update, right? Before updating, whatever the value we have and whatever the update we have. So old will store what is past value, and trigger.new will store what is the latest values. Again, the consideration here in insert trigger, it will not come here. In inserting is something which you are trying to create a new record. There is no whole history. So trigger.old will not come in place of insert operations. It will come in the place of update operations. Likewise, we have also have trigger.new map, which holds a new set of information, whereas key has a record as object ID. So key value pipe. Likewise, we have old map. And another important parameter we have here is operation type. What is operation type? System dot trigger operation type is a enum function which holds the events like before insert, before update, before delete. So all these are key features that key values will be defaulted in the enum function. Enum function called operation type. And there is another thing. Let's say we have a possibility that we write our Apex classes at different places, and I need to execute a particular logic when it is calling from a trigger. I need to execute different logic when it is outside of a trigger. So for that clarification, we don't have any considerations. Again, we need to handle with the variables and all. But by default, system is also providing another context variable called is executing. What is that? Is executing is a context variable. It tells, hey, this is the current scenario which is executing based on the trigger context variable. I mean, within the trigger context execution. Is executing, if it is true, it means that it is being invoked from a trigger class. So let's say a few example how we can define it. This is like a more on theoretical basis. But the question goes always like, do we really important to write a triggers? Yes, there are places that you need to think about. Do we need to go with automation rules, which is provided in the standard options, workflow rules, and process builder? We have a lightning flows, which is more capable now. But trigger is an option where if it is like a over customizer business rules, that time you can take it up. But ensure whenever you are writing triggers have tendency to fall under recursion. So whenever we write trigger, ensure that we are not falling under trigger recursion. So we need to have that check, and we'll be seeing all these scenarios in the going forward. For now, we have a trigger context variables. It's meant trigger context variable is nothing but if you can simply define, it's your class variables which holds the information of that particular transaction. Thank you for watching. Please keep stay tuned for our next update to practical implementation of a trigger. Thank you very much.